Welcome. You know, many of you have visited Meribad and Merazad, and the subject of this session is sharing stories of the Mandali. And I think it's appropriate because some time back when Erich was giving a talk in Mandali Hall, you know, some of the pilgrims were a little on the brassy side, and one of them asked Erich, "What are we going to do, Erich, when you're gone and all the Mandali are gone?" Imagine somebody coming up to you and saying, "What are we going to do when you're dead?" You know, basically that's what they were saying.
Just have to work it out.
Well, what he said was, "You'll all share with each other." And so in that vein, we'd like to have a session here where we can all share stories of Baba's Mandali and close ones. I've been working on a book for a very long time entitled His Brilliant Light, Stories of Meher Baba and His Close Ones. And I've got about 70 stories done, and I have some more to go. And I've gotten many of these written out, and I'm really convinced that the more of these kinds of stories from everyone of the Mandali, the better, because in the future, that's how people are going to experience the Mandali. They'll experience it through the stories of those who met them, as well as videos of the Mandali themselves. So I can start off with a story, and then I'd like to hear a number of your stories. I was talking to Doug this morning about one particular story because he was telling me, you know, he and I anyway are getting to a certain age. So he said, "John, my bags are packed." And that reminded me of this story. Baba was in Mandali Hall with the Mandali when a Maharini came in. And some of you may have read this in Lord Meyer. The Maharini came in and she said to Baba, "My daughter has died and I'd like you to bring my daughter back. I've been going around to all of these masters asking them the same thing. And so it hasn't happened yet, so I'm coming to you. You're supposed to be the avatar, so can you bring my daughter back?" And Baba immediately said, "Yes, of course, no problem." And Erich told us this story. He was thinking to himself, "Baba, what are you saying here? This is a pretty tall order, you know, but I guess if you're avatar, you could do it." So anyway, Baba told the Maharini that, gave her instructions that you go back home and you remember me and do no misdeeds and be honest and all those kinds of things that we know about. And then come back to me in a period of time, I think it was 6 months, and then at that point, I'll bring your daughter back. So, you know, Erich was thinking, this is way beyond Lazarus, you know.
It's going to be smelling pretty bad.
She came back in 6 months, and Baba asked her if she had done everything that he had asked her to do, and she said, "Yes, Baba." And he said, "Okay," now he gave her some more instructions. "Well, I want you to go home, and I want you to be loving to your family and to people that you meet, and remember me, etc., and come back in another 6 months." Well, anyway, Baba did this over a period of time, a number of these 6 months periods, and until she came back and said, "Okay, Baba, now I've done everything you've said for this period of time." I think by that time it was probably a couple of years. And so Baba said to her, "Well, would you rather have your daughter back or would you rather have me?" And she said, "I'd rather have you, Baba." So now what I happened to meet this Maharini when she was a very, very old woman. Not quite as old as Baba Jan, but very old. Because I came to know Kusum and Mokam Singh. Any of you know them? Kusum and Mokam Singh. Very ardent Baba lovers from Delhi. And so Kusum said, "Would you like to go to Dehradun and see my ancestral home and meet my mom?" Her mom was the Maharini. So I said, "Sure." So we took a car up to Dehradun, and Kusum showed me her ancestral home. To give you a sense of the scale, is much larger than this complex, the scale of this ancestral home. She had one of her cousins that was getting married later in the year. And they were inviting 1,000 guests, and they could accommodate them all in this place. There was the women's side and the men's side, and each place was like a vast set of rooms. And in the middle of the courtyard was this big, beautiful cage, probably about as big as our circle here, filled with exotic birds. And in the living room were all these stuffed animals that Kusum and her dad, the Maharaja, had gone out when she was a girl and had gone on tiger hunts and had shot these tigers. And they were there. They're a little moth-eaten around the ears because, it'd been a while. So I got to see her ancestral home. And on the way out of that area, she pointed out to a temple here that my father funded, and there's a school there that my grandfather funded, et cetera, et cetera. So this was the way that the Maharaja and Maharini worked. So we got to Dehradun, and I got introduced to Kusum's mom, the Maharini, the one who had asked for her daughter, asked Baba to bring her daughter back. And so just as any of us would say, "Hi, I'm Jon Meyer," or whoever you are, and "How are you doing?" And her response was, "My bags are packed, and I'm standing on the station platform waiting for Baba to come and take me away in his train, and he is late." That was her response to, "Hi, how you doing?" Anyway, let's hear some other stories now.
Hey, John, before we go on, thanks for bringing that story up. It's great. Just a little detail in there. Baba said to her,
would you pass this down?
one little detail. Baba said to her, "When you see your daughter in a dream, that's a sure sign she's coming back."
Yes.
And then that day when she said he said, "I'm in the mood to grant anything now." And he said, "Quick, would you rather have me or your daughter?"
Right. Thank you for that.
Because she had the dream. She saw the daughter in the dream at that point.
Do you have another story to tell while you've got the microphone?
Yeah, I can think of one. During Baba's travels, he traveled incognito, looking for musts. And one day we were on a train, and you know how packed the trains were back then sometimes. And there was this old Muslim man, beard and everything, and he had a young child, probably a grandkid, and he couldn't even get himself in the car, in the train. So he just asked the people, "Just take my kid, through the window." And nobody wanted to. But Baba gave the sign, and Erich and one of the guys, they pulled him in, and it was a big argument, but they put him on one of their laps and said he won't be a bother, So, and then the old man got himself on another train cart. And every time there was a train stop, the old man would come and make sure the kid was okay. But they monthly were getting worried that the old man would miss getting back on the train, and then they would have to take care of the kid. So on the next stop, Baba said, go get the man in on the train. The same thing, they had to pull him in through the window. And there was a big argument about bringing him in. But they managed to get it done, and he got a seat right next. They put him next to Baba. And Baba gave Erich the sign, and he starts asking him, if he knows about any musts or holy men. And the guy says, well, you're not a Hindu. He says, he was like questioning him, right? And he said, where are you from? And Erich says, Ahmednagar. He goes, Ahmednagar? You're from Ahmednagar? And you're going around looking for holy men? You know that the source of all is in Ahmednagar? He says, it's been my life's wish to go there and meet Meher Baba, but every time I go, he's not there. Baba's sitting right next to the guy. So this goes on, a conversation, and finally the man's stop comes. So him and the kid get off, and he's looking for a rickshaw or something. And Baba tells Erich, you got a picture of me? Go give it to him and tell him, I was there and I give him my blessing and I know everything, So Erich looks through his bag and he finds a photo of Baba in there, and he takes it and he goes running after and he catches the guy. And he tells him this, and the guy starts, what? I was sitting there next to him, and you didn't tell me? And he starts berating Erich and his whole generation. So Erich says, but, Baba said, and so meanwhile the guy starts running, following Erich and running after him. And Erich just gets to the train, and the Baba's now has his head out the window. And the guy sees the man sees Baba, and he comes running up to him, and Baba sticks his hand out and puts his hand on his head.
Wonderful.
Please forgive me. I should have told you all this. I had promised to say this earlier, and the Baba story just reminded me. Laurent has said that he will leave Baba's shaver up on the table as long as possible. But for anyone who wants to take that opportunity to be with it, he'll leave it there as long as possible, but then he's going to move it.
Tell us what happened to you. Holy, tell us what happened to you.
Which one?
Just now with the shaver.
That's fine. Go ahead, Jeff.
I didn't really expect to talk about this, but everybody's so comfortable and intimate in sharing, so I'll tell you how I met Meher Baba and how I know Baba is the avatar. It takes about 10 minutes, so I don't want to take too much time, but it's quite beautiful the way it happened to me. It's 1972, and a fellow named Jerry from California, he's a dancer. I'm sorry, I don't remember Jerry's last name. From a meditation gathering that we used to go to in Manhattan, he came up and he said, in a few weeks I'm going on a dance tour, but there's something really, really very precious that I want you to take care of if you would. I said, sure. Long story short, one evening he came up, he said, I'm leaving on a dance tour for a few months, and I'm going to give this to you. And he walked over to my apartment, and he had this small canvas bag about 18 inches long. He said, this is a Veena that belonged to Meher Baba's sister Mani, and it's priceless, and please take really, really, really good care of it. I said, I promise you I will. So I put it in a shelf, actually in the bathroom. It was a clean shelf. And Jerry gave me a little picture of Baba, and I had seen Baba's picture over the years, don't worry, be happy. I put that on the stove. Long story short, the next day I said, gee, I'm so curious, what could that be? That is that precious, that it's just, I forget Jerry's words, but it's beyond precious. So I went over to the canvas bag and I opened it up about 12 inches. And I see this very, very old instrument that's beige, and I touch the strings that are limp. And I get a message inside you. I asked to babysit this zip this up and go about your business. So I zipped it up and I put it back on the shelf. And the next night I am woken up. And by the way, I've never taken any drugs in my life, not even marijuana. The next night I see Meher Baba above me, about 8 feet up, facing me head over head, chest over chest, legs over legs. And I had this thought, which I never forgot. Immediately I said, this is gravitationally impossible. And the whole room filled up with this ecstatic, overwhelming love. Completely God's love, no time, no space, no Jeff, no nothing. Only this overwhelming, oversaturated feeling of love. And I'm looking up at Baba, and he's above me about 7 feet. Head over head, chest over chest, knees over knees, legs over legs. And then Baba begins to descend inch by inch by inch. And what was already unsurpassable, overwhelming love became even more overwhelming, unsurpassable love. And inch by inch, it's just beyond description. But I tell you because it's wonderful to know who Baba really is. And because I've never taken drugs, I knew this was really not an hallucination. And Baba is descending, he's right over my body, inches, and then he merges through my body. But this is like a Trinity story, because a few years later, I'm reading the New Testament at length. And I come from a Jewish background, but a friend of mine said, have you ever read the New Testament? I said, no. He said, would you be open to it? I said, sure. And he began to read it to me, and I said, these are the most loving words I've ever heard in my life. And they really were. And I began to do a lot of study of the New Testament, commentaries by Catholic and Protestant theologians for years. And about 4 years after my experience with Meher Baba, in the middle of the night, I hear these galloping horses. I mean, they woke me up, and all of a sudden I see Jeff sitting in the lotus position in front of Jeff in the meditation room where I had a little apartment in Manhattan. And a bunch of silver crosses about the size of pins go through my third eye. And I'm blissed in the love of Jesus. Blissed in the love of Jesus. It's extraordinary. I have no idea what's happening. But I know this is the most all love I've ever experienced. Okay? About 4 years later, I'm in Jerusalem. And I am actually studying in a yeshiva to try to connect with my own Jewish roots. And it's the Sabbath, and I got bored in the temple, and as quietly as I could, I walked out. And I began to walk a half an hour and a half later, I'm still walking in Jerusalem. And I said to somebody, what's that building over there? And they said, that's the Holy Sepulchre Church. And I had heard of the Holy Sepulchre Church. Long story short, I was very curious, and I walked into the church in a small room, I would say about the size of this circle. And there's a beautiful small mahogany cross on the floor with the body of Jesus carved onto it. And I was doing Zen at the time, and I did a little Zen bow like that. And my body was lifted off the ground about 6 inches, and I bathed in this ecstatic love of Jesus again. Bathe. Just extraordinary. I also felt a little pain in my side, this particular experience, which was a little bit painful, and I kind of think it was the way that they put that, whatever they cut Jesus' body with. Yeah. And then my body is placed back on the ground, and I'm in that bent over position. I go up, and I walk through the church. Long story short, about 20 years later, I end up in Asheville, North Carolina. Maybe it was 30 years later. And I'm in some of the Baba meetings in Asheville, and it's mentioned that Meher Baba is the avatar. That the avatar came every 700,000 years, and that Meher Baba was Jesus before he was Meher Baba, and before that he was Buddha. And I hear this in my mind, and it's sort of like fantastic. And I'm thinking about it. It's like such a stretch. And then it is a stretch. Well, it was for me. And about 2 years later, I had this epiphany. I said, wait a second. I went into my sense memory of the divine energy embrace. Actually, I'm in a Quaker church at a Kabbalah class with a Christian lady to my left. And I shared this with her. She said, the experience you had is what the Christian mystics call the divine embrace. And then years later, I'm in Asheville, and I'm thinking the exact same love embrace energy of this God's love. It was identical with Meher Baba in 1972. It was the same extraordinary, overwhelming love. Several years later, maybe 4 or 5 years later, with the silver crosses in the middle of the night with the thundering horses. And then 4 years later, 5 years later, I'm in the Holy Sepulchre Church. I'm going through this in my mind. It was the very same extraordinary, overwhelming love embrace. And I'm thinking, oh no, it's a couple of years later of these Baba meetings. I said, how could this possibly be anything? I mean, I knew it was that Meher Baba is the avatar. I would say to myself, how could you have these experiences? I'm just like anybody here. Nobody. That's the way I think of it. I'm not trying to be humble.
Not nobody yet, mister.
Thank you.
Not up to nobody.
Yeah. I know, you're right. So,
Is that when you became a Baba lover?
I became a Baba lover the night that Meher Baba gave me that vision of him. This was not a dream. This was a presence that, like the beautiful stories you just told and others, this experience was even more intimate and more overwhelming and touching your heart. And this beautiful time we've had together at this Northeast gathering, it's really, really been beautiful in every way, beyond beautiful.
Thank you.
And
Thank
those
you so much.
yeah, no, and so when you ask me, the answer is yes to your question. I had no idea what was happening. I guess that's the way Baba works sometimes. It's like, and then years and years and years went by, and then finally I began to be with Baba lovers in Asheville. It's a beautiful community of Baba lovers. And I learned, wow, I mean, it's just the way it slowly happened over decades. So I'm 78 years old, and we all have a little time left. As my wife Rachel says, we only have a few seconds left. Only a few seconds. And she's right. So we do the best we can to love Baba, to love one another, to do some good acts when we have an opportunity to serve others. As so many beautiful musicians have been playing for us, and we've been together. So I just share with you that I know that Baba is the avatar, and such love.
Thank you. Thank you, Jon. Roberta, are you going to tell a story there?
I will.
You've got a Baba story or Mandali.
This would be a Baba story,
Oh,
I
wonderful.
think. Okay. Some of you know that I have spent my life as a Christian pastor. And so my journey has been, Ralph and I have had this kind of parallel interweaving journey over the years, the many, many years we've been together. And so early on when I was in seminary, Ralph was really beginning to read about Meher Baba a lot more. And one night, I put the kids went to bed, right? Finally, the kids are to bed. Ralph's asleep. I'm downstairs studying. And it's getting late, and I'm dead tired, and I have to go to drive to seminary the next day. So I start up the steps, and there's a window right at the bottom of our steps to go upstairs. So I'm walking up, and there was this face outside the window, which was a guy with a turban on. I mean, it was just as clear as day. I said, what the hell? I ran upstairs and said, I am not dealing with that. So, anyway, so, many, many years later, here I am, and I'm still in dialogue with, I'm still having conversations with Mayor Baba, with Jesus, with God. We have talks because, as I've said before, for me, I'm not passive. I just need to ask questions and think about it, and so here I am. So that's about the story.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
We have over this side. Here you go.
Yeah, use the mic on your side.
Okay. I just wanted to share kind of a simpler version of what Jeff shared. And where's Angela? I did share it with Angela this morning, and a few of you have also heard it. But it stays with me. And it was 20-some years ago. I knew nothing about Baba. I had recently begun to interact with Marlene and David at Inner Source, and they did have a photograph of Baba in a closet because it wasn't okay to bring him out of the closet at that point. But that was the sum total of my experience with Baba. And then a couple of months down the road, they said that they were going to take this trip to Myrtle Beach to this spiritual center. And I said, oh, okay, I'm in. And I also come from the Jewish tradition, and so that's my frame of reference. And the night before we're leaving for Myrtle Beach, I have a dream. And I see Baba's face. It's just his face. And it's literally like right over my face. And he takes his hand and he goes like this. And he takes his face off, and under his face is Jesus's face. And then he puts his face back, and then he does it one more time, and he takes his face off.
Did you get that?
And yes, and it's Jesus's face, and he puts his face back, and I said, okay, I get it. and that was the end of the dream. And the next morning, I went to Myrtle Beach, and the rest is history.
Wonderful.
Love history.
Yeah. Mine is really short. We were. I only went to India once, and I had a real connection with Katie. And I'm not going to go into. That's going to feedback. And I don't want to go into everything, but the last day with Katie, we were sitting next to each other, and she had just completely inclined my arm, and she's like this, and all of us going, get on the bus, and then Katie's just like, and we're just like, I'm not leaving, Katie's got me like this, Oliver's, get on the bus, and he comes over with the whistle, get on the bus! and so she leisurely, but she didn't let me go, She leisurely stands up, and then we're moseying toward the bus with Oliver just going ballistic, And she's like, he blames me for this. He always blames. What can I do if you don't want to go? What can I do? And it was just, it killed me. It was just such a. I'm like, I will walk back if I have to. I'm not missing a second of this. So.
Poignant.
I'd rather this mic.
Yeah, I can see why.
Okay.
perfect. So while he was
Better mic.
doing his thing with Katie, earlier that day, I went right into, this was my first time, and I went right into Mandalay Hall to see Erich. I actually came from Moni, but she was dying. It was in August of '96. And for some reason, I was on the airplane on the way to India, and this thought started pestering me. I was 5 months pregnant, and I started thinking about, what if this child doesn't love God? Oh no. You can't make them love God, know God. It's okay if it's not Meher Baba, it's okay if it's not Jesus, but a child who doesn't have God, that would just be so hard. That was my lifeline. So by the time I walked into Mandalay Hall, this is 3 days later, and Erich said, Devana, before we start, would you go get those stories, my favorite, the 5 Perfect Master, you know, those stories. And she went and got it. And then he proceeded to tell a story about, I mean, I barely remember the details of the story, except that there was a guy involved in a carriage and a woman having a baby and all this stuff going down. He said it was his favorite one. And then he said, you know what this means? This means that the highest blessing given to a child is to be born in a family that loves God. And I just went, oh. And the worry went away, and he said, now we can begin.
A very beautiful story. Were you there for Mani's funeral?
That was interesting because I had written to Mani a few times and said that I'm so drawn to you, seeing you in the movie, I think it was the Avatar or something, where she's explaining all those gestures. I said I had no desire to go see where Meher Baba was or where he was buried because I knew he was with me, but I really wanted to meet her. So he used Mani to pull me there, and then it was, of course, incredibly sacred once I got there. But I was really sad that Mani was passing.
Yeah.
She said that we would be together in Baba's perfect time. And when I was sitting at the Samadhi one day, there was a gentleman sitting next to me, and he said, isn't it amazing how Mani brought us all together? I said, what are you talking about? And he said, we're all here for Mani because she's passing. And I went, wow. I was quite moved by that and relieved. And when we left, it was Rusty and his 14-year-old son and I, and right before we got on the plane, they called his 14-year-old son up to the front, and they're like, what do they want with him? would Eric Rust please come to the and we're like, we're going with him. And then as we were walking up, they were calling us too, and they said, we are so sorry, but the plane is full and we're going to have to put you in business class. Is that okay? We're like, yeah, that's good. Okay. Wow, sure. And so the 3 of us were in these luscious seats, which was great because I had been sick for a week and I was just recovering, so it was perfect. We all crashed out really hard. It was like that 1 a.m. flight. And at 7 a.m., we suddenly, the 3 of us, all opened our eyes and looked at each other. And we saw the most beautiful sunrise outside the plane that we followed for an hour. And as soon as we got home, somebody had called us and left us a message and said, Mani passed at 7 a.m.
Yeah. Well, I guess the sequel to that is about Mani's funeral, which, were any of you there on August 19th in 1996? It was something that is going to be remembered for generations because Mani passed away that morning, and she was taken up to the samadhi, and the remaining mandali gathered, and then she was set outside for a bit near her beloved Mara's tombstone there, and then taken down to Lower Mehrabad to where the funeral pyre is. Now, if you go down the hill from Mehrabad, make a right turn and go toward Arrangown, on the far side of the road is where the cremation grounds are for the trust. So they put her on the funeral pyre and put sandalwood all around her. And they lit the fire. And normally, one of those funeral pyres will last for a day or maybe a day and a half. This funeral pyre lasted for 3 days. And as the fire started, 2 sadhus came by, and they called Erich over. And Erich went to talk to them, and they said, "Who is that on the funeral pyre? We noticed that it's not the black smoke of a regular person. This is the light gray smoke of a saint. Who could it be?" And Erich said to them, "Well, this is Meher Baba's sister, Mani." And they said, "We understand now." So the fire burned on and on. When the fire was lit, of course, there were shouts of "Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai." And as I was standing there hour after hour, watching the funeral pyre burn, I couldn't help but thinking of stories that came to mind that Mani had told. One story was about the potter. Now, on one of my visits to Mehrabad, I was taken to the village of Pimplegown where the local potter was actually throwing pots on something that looked like a wagon wheel suspended by one point, and he'd use the stick on the spokes to get it spinning real fast and smack down a big piece of clay and start bringing the pot up. So Mani told the story about the potter and about how as he brings the pot up higher and higher, he keeps his hand on the inside of the pot as he smacks the outside of it with a paddle in order to spread the clay out and make it even and make it strong. And she said to us, who were there in Mandalay Hall at the time, that's a metaphor for Meher Baba. We may feel the smacks of the paddle on the outside, but remember that unseen, his hand is inside the pot, supporting us. So that story came to mind. Another, after a while of watching the fire burn for, as I said, 3 days, another story of Mani came to mind. And that was that years before, Erich had called her to go out to a field close by Marazad. And it was in the evening, and the sun was going down. And there was a shepherd there who had his coat pulled over his head so you couldn't see him, but he was sitting there. And after a while, the sheep started bleating. You know, they couldn't see the shepherd anymore. And clearly they were disturbed. Where's the shepherd who's going to take care of us? And this went on and on all night long until the dawn came. And then the sheep realized that the shepherd had been there all along. So Mani told us again, that's like Baba, who is the shepherd, who is watching over us. Even though we may not see him, he's there, and he's taking care of us. So that was another story. There's a third story. You know, Monty had a terrific wit. And during the New Life in 1949, they were in the North Country. They went up into the foothills of the Himalayas, up toward Simla and up that way. And one day, a sadhu came in and was very loud and very adamant about getting fed the right food. He had to have the right food. And he insisted and insisted, and he was very persistent and very loud there where the Baba and the Mandali were. And finally they got him something and sent him on his way. So that gave Mani an idea. A few days later, she dressed up as a sadhu herself. And you know, Mani was very good at voices. So she disguised herself so well that when she came in and started speaking like this same sadhu, Goher was completely taken in. And Goher and Mani practically got into a fight because Mani was so loud and so insistent and wanting the food and wanting just this kind of food and no, that isn't right. And they almost got into a fight when Mani took her disguise off and all the Mandali had a great laugh. So she had that side of her as well. And the fire burned on and continued burning on. I thought of Mani with our children when we first brought them to India. And back to the first time I met Mani, back in 1973. Now, I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but Mani would go to the registration and she would look at everyone's photo and study. You know, remember we had to hand in photos there to the registration? She would memorize everyone's photo. And so when I arrived, she said, "Oh, you're Jon Meyer. Welcome." And I thought, this is Baba's sister, and she knows who I am. How amazing is that? And that's how Mani cared for people. She wanted everyone to be loved and everyone to be welcome. Later, when we brought our children, she played with our boys. She made, you know, these kind of finger puppets on the wall. My older son, Jonas, who's now 45, saw Mani take water out of that special pot there that they used for the water pot in Marizad and pour it right down her throat without swallowing. And Jonas, my 8-year-old son, was just wowed by that. And he said, "Mani, how do you do that?" And she said, "Oh, it just takes practice. It just takes practice." And then Jonas, being innocent, asked her, "Mani, why is your skin so light? It's so much lighter than the rest of the Mandali." And Mani, without missing a beat, said, "You know, at one time I had this skin disease where my skin was light and dark in various places, and Baba cured that and made all my skin the same color." So Jonas was very appreciative of that. But the thing that we noticed was when she was interacting with our boys, at the same time she was telling them stories at their level, we were getting the benefit of that at our level as adults. So that was very sweet.
John, I wonder if I could add, she also collected, she has a photo album of all the children's pictures. So in Mandali Hall at Marizad, there's collections of all the children. I remember when I went, and my children were small, and so I had pictures of them, coveting those pictures of my children because I miss them so much. But then I gave them over to Mani to put in the photo albums.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So let me finish up about Mani's funeral. So the fire from the funeral pyre burned on for 3 days. And at the very end, there was a tiny flame where Monty's heart was. That was all that was left of one of the great hearts of our age. Jai Baba. How about some other stories?
Well, I gotta follow. I never met Monty, okay, but I had this strange connection. You may all know about me and my connection with Bobby Gardino, right? He's my brother, my and he told me that he was in Mehrabad. This is nuts. And he had met Monty, and this was in maybe 72-ish, 73, something like that. And he felt compelled to walk into the trust and ask Monty to marry him.
What did she say?
And so she said, "Oh, Bobby, darling, I couldn't possibly marry you." She said, "I'm already married to Baba, you know." But Erich flung into a rage and said, "Get out! Get out!" And he chased Bobby out of the compound, right? And Bobby ran, and Bobby said, he was staying in Lower Mehrabad at the time, and that night at 10 o'clock, the knock on the door, and Bobby opened the door, and it was Erich. He says, Bobby, I'm so glad you answered the door and you weren't asleep." He goes, "Because I was so afraid that if I went to sleep and I didn't wake up, I couldn't apologize to you." This, for someone like me who hadn't met them, and to hear these types of stories, but, so years later, Bobby would always say to me, "Paulie, I don't want to come back, bro. I want mukti, Paulie. I don't want to come back, bro." And then Bobby passed away, right? And that's a whole nother story. But I was thinking, why hadn't he come to me? He's my brother. Why hasn't he? I was for sure he was going to come to me. Nothing. Nothing for months. And I said, "That son of a bee." I said, "He got mukti." I said, son of a, figures. And then, this is crazy. Then he came to me in a dream.
What?
Bobby came to me in a dream, and he brought me into this setting. And Monty is standing there, and Bobby is saying to her, pointing over her shoulder, "I want to go with him." Because that was Bobby. I mean, he was just it was his way or the highway. And he was referring to, "I want to go with Baba. I want to go with him." And Monty stepped in front of him and said, "Not now, not now." And she handed him 3, as she was handing this to him, she said, "Pita, pita." Now, I had no clue what that meant until later, but I'll explain in a minute. So she hands him 3, which looks like dollar bills. And Bobby's got a pout on his face as usual. And he's looking at the 3 bills, and he shows them to me. And they were like a child had written, because he is a child, but had written 3 $1 bills with Bob's face on them, on the front, and on the back it was blank, right? And he went like this, and then Monty took him by the hand and walked off with him.
Yeah, how wonderful.
So I want to go with Baba, and she steps in front of him, "Not now." She says, "Pita, pita." So I was repeating that in the car one day, and it was Prakash, and Prakash said to me, "Oh, I know what that means. That's our language." I go, "What does it mean?" She goes, "Father." It means father. So she was handing him the 3 bills, saying from the father, from Baba. I don't know what the 3 meant, 3 more lifetimes or whatever, but she walked away with Bobby, meaning, in my opinion, that he will serve Mani. So he had asked her to marry him, and he got a little bit more than he's gonna bargain for. Okay, just saying. And so yeah, that's my Mani story.
Paul, could you tell your story about your dad and Baba and his relationship with Baba?
Oh, do we have that time? I don't want to.
Baba say Mani would be a saint.
Well, I heard a perfect master. That's why I'm saying. I think when she said the 3, I'm thinking it's 3 more lives, and you're serving me, brother. Then you get to the big guy, you know. So my dad passed away last year. He's 96 years old. When I came to Baba, when I was to Bobby Gardino, long story short, they literally, it was like it was jail or this, and so my parents, while they were happy and they knew Bobby Gardino and his family from Brooklyn, they thought I was in a cult, you know. But they would say that's still better than jail. So, so as the years went on, though, and going over 40-something years, they got to know Baba, right, through me, and they're like, wow, you know, how bad can it be? Like, look at the guy, you know. And so, as my dad got older, you get that call at night. He was 92 years old. And you get that phone call at night, and you're already getting dressed, you know. And he says, something's happened. I said, all right, calm down. I'm getting dressed. I'm coming. Just, you know, just relax. Let me know what happened. We get the ambulance. He goes, no. He goes, your Baba came to me in a dream. I'm like, what? Say that again? He says, yeah, your Baba came to me in a dream. I'm like, whoa. I said, well, what did he want? He goes, well, he said to me, why aren't you doing what you love? Now, backstory, my dad used to play alto sax and jazz bands, paint, and he had given it up decades ago. So my father says to Baba, I don't know what do you mean? And then he said he got really serious, Paul. And he looked at me and he goes, well, you love to draw, don't you? And my father said, yeah. And then he said his eyes got like fire. He goes, so then draw. And my father woke up and drew Baba as he saw him in the dream, right? But then he could not stop. There is not a room in the house, not one piece of wall that doesn't have some drawing or painting. And my mother's like, what is going on with your father? It's like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. I'm like, Ma, leave him alone. Leave him alone. And he started painting things like Christ ascending into heaven. Now, my father's more of a wise guy than anybody religious. And then he started drawing photos of Baba with Baba's face over the Ellora caves. This is a Guido from the Bronx, okay? And then I knew when I saw the one painting of an Indian woman in a sari dancing, right? My father, right? And behind her in the sky was a golden eye. I'm like, hey, Pop, what's with the eye? He goes, I don't know. He goes, it just came to me. And I'm just like... So when he explained this to me on the phone, he goes, what does it all mean? I don't have any idea. I don't know. What? He goes, you're the expert. You don't have... I'm disappointed. He goes, you don't know. He goes, you're like, it's a waste. What was the point? And I looked at him. I said, Pop, I'm just trying to be honest with you. I don't know what it means. Anybody who really tells you they know what it means, they're kind of full of shit. Sorry. It's just, I go, but I could say this. I can tell you. That of all the billions of people in the world, the Lord of the universe took the time to come into your dream. That, in and of itself, Pop, you're sealed. You're good. You're done. Right? He goes, oh, okay, that's all right. It's okay. That sounds good. So he continued on, but then he got really sick last year. He had never really, only sick one other time I could remember. And he, in the nursing home, he had Baba's picture around his neck every day. And he always would say, even as it was getting worse and worse, he'd say, Baba, Baba, Baba. And I said, I was like, you can't ask, this is what I'm saying, you can't ask for more than this. I don't know what else to say, but that's the story of my dad. Thank you.
Yay, Baba, wonderful. Who else has a story, Baba story or story of the Mandali? Jean, can we pass the mic to Jean? Thank you, Jean.
Before I have a couple of stories, and I'll tell you the shorter one. But before I do that, a little bit to add to John's story about Mani and the skin disease. It's called vitiligo, or it used to be. There may be another name for it today. The way I had heard it was that Shireen, Mani's mother, wanted very much for Mani to get married. And Baba did not want that, and neither did Mani. And a marriage was arranged by Shireen with some Indian boy. And after that took place, this disease appeared on Mani's body, where she got all patchy, light skin and dark skin, and the family backed off. And that was Baba's wish. So,
Baba actually warned Shireen, is what I heard.
uh-huh.
Shireen, don't do it.
And she went ahead and did it anyway. Well, she was a determined lady. So, getting to my story, this is the story of my humiliation and then redemption. So, takes place in 1986, and I went to India with my friend Ruth Rosen, just the two of us. And as in those days, the women Mandali once a month would come to the Samadhi and have perform arti. And all of them would come, and there were a lot of them. They were all still in their bodies. So Ruth and I were asked if we would garland Baba's picture when the women came. Simple thing, and we said yes, we would, of course. And so all the women Mandali come into the Samadhi, and Mera and Mani are right in the front, and there may be a dozen or 15 of ladies. And Baba's picture is at the head, and we're handed this huge garland, and we're to do this task. And Ruth puts her the garland on her corner, and I go to put it on my corner, and hers slips off. I put it on my corner, and her corner slips off. And we go back and forth like this. We can't do it. And it was, you know, two grown women can't garland Baba's picture. And Mera in the very front row goes like this. Such a simple thing. We were mortified. As soon as she said that, we got it. You know. But anyway, so that was one day. And the next day, Ruth and I are invited to have tea with Mera. And in the dining room at where all the ladies lived. So we're all having tea, and Mera asks if we'd like a second cup. So a lot of the women said yes. So the teapot is being passed around, and everyone's pouring their tea. And it gets to be my turn, and I go to pour my tea, and the pot is empty. So I didn't say anything. And I was sitting at one end of the table, and Mera was at the other end. And Mera gets up, walks around to me, picks up the teapot, goes into the kitchen, fills it with tea, and comes back and fills my cup. So I thought, oh, she's forgiven me. And I felt so happy, and without, you know, I was redeemed. So, yeah.
Forgiveness from Mera is pretty important. Yeah. Who can go next?
Right next to you.
I'm not sure what year this was exactly, but it would have been 88, something like that, 87, 88, 89, somewhere in there. And I lived on a farm in eastern Kentucky, and I told them I was invited to tea, and I told them this story. I told them about the time that I lived in a shack called the Black House. No toilets, no electricity, nothing, but anyway. And I was going to go sleep, and I heard the sound of water, and there was no running water there. I'm like, what on earth is that? And then I realized that earlier that day, I was taking care of 23 cows, and the cows had gotten out, and I was there alone, and I was like, well, I'm going to leave the gate open because they'll have to go back. When they get thirsty, they'll just go back in, and I'll shut the gate. And so when they decided to go back in, I counted them. I'm like, I am missing a cow. So when I heard that water, I was like, oh my God, the cow fell in a well. Because I'd always been told there was a well up there, and I'd taken sticks and tried to find it. Anyway, so sure enough, there was a cow at the bottom of the well. His head was like this, and and so I went and I could tell the cow had to strain to keep its head up above the water. So I got a couple bales of hay and dropped them in there so now I could stand on that. And this is when Mara and Monty started to laugh. Then I got my tape recorder out and put on Gregorian chants for the cow. Yeah.
Like you do.
Yeah, like you know.
That's in the manual, isn't it?
The story. So then, I went around and asked, well, not a lot of people in those parts. But I asked these oldies. I said, have you ever had a problem like this? And how did you fix it? And finally, I was getting enough. Nobody had that quite particular problem, but mules had flipped over, things like that. And so I went to the corner and got straps to lower caskets into graves. And my younger brother, this was his cows. And I said to him, I had called him up. I said, the cow fell in the well. And he said, shoot her. And I said, I tell you what, Will, if you want to shoot her, you have to come do that. I'm not shooting her. Anyway, so my brother did come, and he went down in the well and strapped up the cow, and we had a tow truck come and pull the cow up over the thing. And so this is Dolly-esque, if nothing. This cow is hanging from the thing. And the motor on the truck died. And these boys got a screwdriver, and they started up in 10 seconds. I mean, they just had it back up. And so, anyway, they liked that story and laughed and had a very good time. That's it.
Wonderful.
I thought you said when you played.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And this baby, it had a calf. It came out. I had invited the vet to come over. He gave the mama a shot in the butt, and they went back in the field and lived happily ever after. But that cow would, when I would go down there and feed it, she would turn and look at me. I mean, the other cows, they were like, oh, the hay. And she would turn and look at me.
Sorry, you told me when you played the Gregorian chant, the cow just drowned itself.
Different story. That was a different
That's a different story, right?
Different version.
Who is next? Who's next? Someone else? Yes, Rick. Yeah, there you go.
Two things with respect to Monty. Monty provided, something I still ponder this, but Monty provided the best explanation for free will that I've ever heard, and I repeat it to people when we get onto that subject. John? Oh, the voice is enough. And she described it this way. She said, think of yourself as being on a moving train. You're in a car and on a train. It's traveling cross country at very, very high velocity, and you're up hills and down into valleys. And there's just this sense of kind of inevitability. You're going to get to where you're going to get to, and you have no immediate control. You can't control the speed of the train. You can stop it to get off if you wanted to. However, you have the option to get up from your seat and move across the aisle and sit down on the other side. And she said, that's about as much free will as you've got. You can change the perspective, but you can't change the inevitable destiny of where you're going. I find it very helpful, actually. Apparent, as Bible calls it, apparent free will. The other one, more on a personal note. I visited, I went to India, probably my second time, I guess it was, in 81. And I was going back to marry my lovely wife, Paula. This was a kind of a last ditch effort to get out in the world and be with Baba in India. And I was troubled, not troubled so much, but my heart was heavy. I mean, I was going back. We were going to be married. We were having a child, and I guess my energy must have just been in that kind of place. And Molly kind of came up to me and cornered me in the field, in the garden one afternoon. She said, "Are you happy?" I went, "Oh boy." "Well, sir, man, yes, I'm delighted. I think everything's going fine in my life." And she gave me this incredibly inscrutable look. And I didn't have the wherewithal to really share what I was feeling and what was going on in my life. And I've kind of regretted that this entire time, and that I hadn't been able to open up to her in that way. She obviously saw right through me. She knew I was wrestling with something in my life, and yet somehow talking to her about it lifted some of the heaviness. So we went back and we got married, and we had a wonderful life together, 43 years at this point. 3 wonderful children and 4 grandchildren. So we're still out rolling here.
I have a story that goes along with your free will. So, new to Baba, pretty much just met Rick, moved to Switzerland, one of my first Baba dreams. And I was on a Swiss train platform, of course. It has to be in Switzerland, right? With these on-time trains. And I'm the only one on the platform. And at quite a distance, there is a man in a trench coat with big hair. And his back was to me, and I'm just looking at him, and I started walking to him, and then all of a sudden Baba turns around, and he takes my hand, and we board the train, and he said, "We're going for a ride." And all of a sudden the train started moving, but we stayed right in place, and the train sort of like went through us, and it just kept going through us. And then that was the dream. I woke up, but it's been a lovely, sometimes hard ride, but a lovely ride, and I'm grateful for that dream.
I want to give you free will. Someone will have to tell me if they either have heard this, because I've only heard this once, and it was Baba, and it's pretty interesting. So if anyone else has heard this, let me know who the other person was. But someone had asked Baba about free will, and they were probably in Mandalay Hall or something, and Baba said to him, I have to show it to you. Baba said to him, "Raise your hand." So the guy raised his hand. And then Baba just started talking to others, conversing, whatever. And the guy's just sitting there, and then he goes, "Baba, free will." And Baba says, "Oh, that's right. Yeah. Raise your other hand." Now the guy's got both hands in the air, right? And Baba just keeps talking to everybody again. And the guy is just like, "Baba, free will, Baba. You're talking free will. You're telling me it's free will." And he said, "Oh, yes." He goes, "Raise your leg." And he's starts talking to everybody, and the guy's just sitting there after a while, and it's really now. He's like, Baba, please. Free will. Baba says, oh, yeah, that's right. He goes, raise your other leg. He says, but I can't. And Baba says, that's because free will is rooted in divine will. If anybody knows who that person was that asked the question, I never found out.
You have a question for him.
I did hear that story.
Do you know who the other person was?
We heard it from you, Paulie.
No.
To just add a note about that free will, if you recall, last year when Charles was here, he was asking Erich about it. And you know, he was explaining why he thought we had free will and everything. And Erich just says, no, brother. No free will.
Apparent free will.
The illusion of free will.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a story.
Yeah, Doug, thank you. Thank you, Marvin.
When I was in India the first time in '79, I really didn't have a lot of questions. I didn't ask many questions, but there was a point, there was a lingering question in my mind about Baba's silence, and I asked, people were just gathered around, I asked about the Hollywood Bowl thing, where Baba, you know, told everybody he's going to break his silence, and you know, why was he doing that? He's telling people, and then he didn't, you know, and how'd you guys, you know, what was it like for you guys in that? And it's hard to explain what she said, but it was like nonchalant, like, oh, we never listened to that stuff with Baba. We're just he does this shit all the time. It's like, you know, we got other stuff we're doing. You know, Baba just, you know, it was just like, oh man, Baba just playing games. You know, the whole silence thing, it means infinitely something different to everybody. You can measure it on many levels. Honestly, at this point in my life, I think Baba broke his silence to me the moment I saw him and said, I am the Ancient One. And my soul said, yeah, you're the Ancient One. And I was Rama, and my soul said. So, you know, it's many masked dimensions of what Baba means and what he does with this silence thing. Though he likes drama, so everybody's got a theory. And one other quick thing, I love this little, she told the story, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard this. She was in the modeling hall with Baba one time, alone, and there was one of the dogs laying at his feet, and he's having a dream, and he's moving his feet and stuff, and Baba calls her over, and she said, yeah, what Baba? Yeah. He's having a dream. He said, yeah, this is like my humanity. They're all dreaming, but they're always at my feet.
Someone who hasn't had a chance yet? Yes, over here.
Jai Meher Baba. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sailaja Adhiram, and this is my husband Prakash. I've been married to him for 38 years now, and I'll share my story about how my coming to Baba. So before meeting my husband's family, my in-laws, we never heard about Meher Baba. So it's a funny story. My mother-in-law, well, you know, ours is a very arranged marriage in India. We had that at that time. So my mother-in-law saw me in his cousin sister's wedding. So she, at that time, felt, okay, this girl looks good. She's going to be good for my third son. So she approached our family, and she was matchmaking. So she decided that I should get married to her third son. So when she went home and she mentioned it to him, I'm going to embarrass him. So she mentioned it to him, and he was like, "Are you serious? Did you even see how tall she is? I'm not going to get married to her. No way." Okay. I'm sharing this story because last year we were in Assisi, and we were all sharing our stories about how we came to Baba, and everybody was like, "Baba came into my dreams, and I had this," and that never happened to me. Baba never came into my dreams. And then Phil shared his beautiful story, and he's like, "Oh, Sally, you never had that aha moment? That, oh, Baba is God?" And I'm like, "No, Phil." And then I was thinking about it, and then so he was very sure that he was not going to get married to me because I'm taller and he's not. He's shorter than me. So long story short, somehow we stood next to each other, and he was convinced that he's an inch taller than me. So so he agreed to marry me, and he's a wonderful guy, my soulmate, my best friend. And I'm sure he must be feeling now that that's the best decision he ever made in his life. So in retrospect, I think back after all these years, I'm like, as much as he was trying to get away from me, I had to come into this family, and this is my connection. I'm pretty sure I was a Baba lover in my past life, and in this life, this is how I am. And that we are the third generation. His grandfather was the first person, his maternal grandpa, who met Baba. And he was born in Ahmednagar, in Booth Hospital. And so ours is the third generation of Baba lovers. Jai Baba.
Maybe Baba had him grow a couple of inches before he got married.
That's called the parrot 1 inch.
I thought Prakash was 5 inches taller than you.
Prakash, you can take those lifts out of your shoe now.
I made sure she doesn't wear the
heels anymore.
I would make sure of that too.
Yeah.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
That's great. That's a Baba connection. So
Who's next?
I guess I'll go. Is this thing working? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right, this is my own story. It's nothing sensational, but it's my story. When I was a teenager, I grew up in a family of alcoholics, and I was drinking and drugging from the age of 10. At the age of 16, I got into a drug rehab program. It was really not it's not really a rehab program. It was a program afternoon, and I was paid $50 to go. That was the only reason why I was going there, to be very honest. Anyway, so I remember, I went to the program director's desk, and he had a picture of Mayor Baba on his desk. And I said, "Who's that?" And it was the famous picture of Baba's "Don't Worry, Be Happy" with the smile from ear to ear. And it just really touched me. And I don't remember what he said. I don't know if any of you know him. He's now passed on. His name is Hugh McClanahan. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you know him from Staten Island. Oh, yeah. And so I didn't give up drugs and alcohol right away. It took me a long while. But, I just realized that, if it wasn't for the fact that I grew up in an alcoholic family, I would have never met Baba. So I'd be grateful. So,
would have met him another way.
Another way, yeah, he would have. And realized that recently, I've realized that that for whatever reason, Baba picked me he was drawn to me for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't fully understand it. I'm just starting to I really haven't followed Baba most of my life. It's only been maybe the past, several years that I've really tried to get closer to Baba, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, stick to it, yeah.
So, thank you.
Who else? Everyone else is too shy? All right, Vanessa.
All right, let me think about this. Okay, this involves Erich. And there's just one little story and one bigger story. But the first story was, I was 23, staying in Mehrabad for 6 months. And towards the end of my stay, I ended up getting engaged to my first husband, and I felt it was necessary to announce it to all the Mandali because I felt guilty for having any sort of romantic endeavor in India, and I just thought it was very I need to be appropriate. So I went up to Erich after the talk, and I said, I just want to let you know that I've met this man, and we've gotten engaged. And he looked at me. It's a powerful story. Anyway, is it working? Yeah, it's working. And as a 20-something with your first marriage, you're thinking, oh, someone's going to congratulate you. It's going to be, a sweet moment. But instead, he looked at me and he took his hand back like this, and he whacked me really hard between my shoulder blades, and he said, so what? And I was like, for a minute there, I was shocked. Like Vanessa was like, wow, that was not what I expected. And then I said, oh, that makes perfect sense, right? Because the only thing that matters is Baba. But I thought that was a really strange delivery time to, yeah. So that. Yeah. So that was like kind of, my first real intimate interaction with Erich, and then. So now I've gotten married. I have my first child, and there's a group of people that are going to Mehrabad, and I'm like, oh, I'd like to go, but I've got a 4-month-old baby, So I'm like, well, they say not to bring your child until they're 7. So what should I do? So I wasn't worried about illness or death. I mean, to me, India felt more like home than where I was. So I started asking around, and I got, a variety of opinions. Your baby will definitely die, if you take your baby to India. Who knows, it was like all this variety of whatever, or, you'll be, asked to leave, or, whatever. And I just thought, well, thinking about the kind of opportunity to put my baby at the master's feet, I thought, well, I'll take the risk. I mean, that would be the greatest thing you could do, right? So I did that. I flew all the way to India with this infant, and I stayed with the Coxes because they had a big house and we could stay there. And then it was time to go to Merzad, and I was like, oh gosh, here we go. Got this baby, and I had him in a sling, so you couldn't really see I had a baby. It just looked like I had a broken arm. So I walked up, and the porch is where you get your hugs and you be greeted, and there'd usually be like 5 or 6 of the Mandali, but this time it was just Erich and me. And somehow no one had gotten off the bus but me in the beginning. So I was like, wow, okay, here we go. So I went up to him, and he's like looking, and then I show him the feet, hanging out of the sling, and then he's like, oh. And so then he wants me to then hand him the baby. And I'm thinking at this point, he's going to tell me. He's like, you're going to have to leave.
And I'm keeping the kid.
So, but instead, he held him, and I was breastfeeding, so I was thinking, okay, it'd be just a couple moments, and then he'll be unhappy, and he'll want to, no. Erich was holding, and I named my first son Narayan, holding Narayan, and Narayan seemed to be perfectly happy, just content. And then they were having a moment, and then the line queued up, by Erich, and I thought, okay, he's going to hand me the baby. No, he hugged every single pilgrim while holding Narayan. And the pilgrims didn't seem to mind. Erich didn't seem to mind, and Narayan didn't seem to mind. The only person that was in a panic was me, because I was like, at this point, I was like, okay, he's a better mother than I am. Like, I was like, I was starting to feel really insecure. And then I was like, okay, then, it takes a good 20 or 30 minutes to greet that many pilgrims. I mean, so after that, I thought, okay, he's going to hand me the baby. He's going to go in and do the talk. No, he took Ryan into the talk. And he sat down in his little spot, and Ryan was there in his lap, and I thought, okay, he's definitely a better mother than me. Look, I mean, that. And then I thought, okay, people are going to start complaining because they're not going to be able to hear him in the talk. He's going to interrupt. No, 2 hours. Narayan, he'd never in his whole infancy been that content for that long. And the two of them just sat together, and to me, that was the answer, like I was so worried about, being...
Maybe they were old friends.
Yeah, who knows? So then I'm like, okay, well, if that went okay, I can go back and maybe meet the women. So I was walking by the New Life, caravan, and came around, and before I could even get to the porch, Go Hair was in her little automated wheelchair. And she had a slew of women around her, and she immediately spotted Narayan, and I didn't exist, so that was very self-effacing, yeah. So she took Narayan, and she was like, oh, we have to show him Mayer's garden. I was like, wow, okay. Yeah, no, it was like, oh my gosh, he's back, we're going to show him the garden. So like, she went to every flower. She was like talking to him like he was an adult and describing the flowers, and we went through the garden. Not at all what I expected, but it was a delight, and I took away from that like, I think they understand the sacrifices we make in love and the risks, and I think Baba through them was, showing me that, even to the point when I ended up at the samadhi, I couldn't go into the samadhi because I had the baby, so all the workers that were up on the hill came running over, and they took Narayan, and they wanted to play with him while I went in to be with Baba, so it was a very healing moment for me. Thanks.
Hey, Baba.
At what point did they paint the mustache on the cake? Anything else? Well, I have one last story for me. It's kind of awkward for me to share, but I'm going to do it anyway. In the 80s, I got involved with a New Age cult that the founder was a Baba lover. I don't know if anyone have heard of direct centering, Nexus, but anyway, this weekend they're having a reunion. I haven't seen any of these people for 35 years, some of them. I've seen some of them on Facebook, of course. But anyway, I just chose to come here instead of the reunion, which is happening in Washington. But at 1 o'clock today, I'll be zooming in with them and seeing them for the first time in like 35 years. Anyway, just a little story. It was a group that did some practices that were focused on some of the teachings of Baba. Basically, they would have people get up in front of the room and they would say, "What are you wanting?" And the person would say, "I don't know." We'll look at it. What are you wanting? I want your approval. Frequently would be the thing that people would say. He says, "Well, let go of that and tell me when you've done that." It was very direct, very Baba-like, but also there was a lot of things that were not Baba-like. I have to be honest and say that. But the power of Baba was still there, and it was behind some of the work we did there. But anyway, that's what I got. I'm going to be saying hello to them at 1 o'clock on Zoom.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah,
say hi for us.
All right, I will. Thanks.
I'd like to tell the story of Shaligram Sharma. Anybody knew Shaligram? Anybody met him? Met him. So Shaligram Sharma grew up in a family that was not very loving. There were all kinds of problems. And at the age of 11, he decided he was going to go find God in the Himalayas and go up to Rishikesh up in the mountains. So he got on a train with a friend of his. And on the way, a blind sadhu met him and told him, you don't want to go up there. You know, he'd asked him, where are you going, etc. He said, the sadhu told him, you don't want to go up there because those sites are not as for God as you might think. So I want you to go back home. So Shalagram went back home. He finished his studies. He still wanted to find God very badly. He went to college, and after he got out of college, he became a prosecutor. After a period of time, he was transferred to Hamirpur. So he was the prosecutor in Hamirpur. And he met a number of people there, Kisham Nigan and Pukar, a number of others. And they gave him God Speaks to read. And when he read God Speaks, he said, this is the avatar. No one else could have written this. So he became a Baba lover. Now, he decided he wanted to go and see Baba. And he tried to in around 1960 or so. He traveled all the way to Ahmednagar to Mehrabad, and Baba was in seclusion. So Baba, Shalagram met Jal, Baba's brother, and he said to Jal, I'm here to see Meher Baba, and Jal told him that Baba's in seclusion. So Shalagram showed Jal his photograph and told a bit about himself and asked if he could go and take this to Baba so that Baba could give him permission to have his darshan. And Jal came back and said, well, Baba can't see you now, but he said that he loves you and he definitely wants to call you back to see him. And Shalagram was overjoyed. So he returned home to Hamirpur. And then he came back in 1961. And he met Baba, and Baba asked him, what do you want? And Shalagram said, I want to dedicate my life to you, and I want to, let me see if I can find the exact quote so I get it right here. Yeah, he said, I want to be true to my surrender to Baba. That's what he said. And then Baba asked Alaba to recite a couplet in Persian and then translate it. And the couplet was, since the time I have surrendered myself to my beloved, I have become totally useless to the world. So Baba asked Shalagram, do you really want to become totally useless to the world? And Shalagram said, okay, sure, as long as I can love you. Baba didn't make him useless to the world by any means, but he asked him to sing. And Shalagram started to sing, and the translated words I have are, Baba, give me the strength to surrender totally to your will and take refuge in you. And at this point, Baba raised his hand, and Baba's words were, God has heard you and has granted your wish. And at that point, there was thunder and lightning that Shalagram just described as being in Mandalay Hall. This incredible light and clap of thunder, and Baba's response to that was, God has heard you and has granted your wish. Now fast forward until Shalagram was an elderly man, and I was very happily assigned tomb duty during Amartiti. So I was observing the line of thousands of people, and I was inside the Samadhi, helping people bow down and helping them out of the Samadhi. That was my job. And after the first hour of that, I was totally absorbed with bliss. So many people had come in and laid down their love to Baba, and Baba was responding. And the whole atmosphere there was just one of incredible love. So much to my delight, the person who was supposed to relieve me didn't show up. So I got another hour in the Samadhi. And by the time I was done with that second hour in the Samadhi, I staggered out. I was so overwhelmed with the love of these thousands of people that were there and coming through the Samadhi that I could barely walk. And Shalagram Sharma came over to me. And he put his hand on my shoulder and took my shoulder, on my elbow, and took my elbow. And he said, brother, it looks like you've been soaked with Baba's love in the Samadhi. Can I help you? And I said, well, I should get back to the Meher Pilgrim Retreat, which you know is some distance away. And Shalagram helped me back to the Meher Pilgrim Retreat, and on the way told me about how he was constantly soaked in Baba's bliss and love. For me, it was temporary. For him, he was radiant. That was Shalagram Sharma. Jai Baba.